All right, good morning. We are learning Leila Nishmas Mendel Mariam Askam and Reuven Hamashamash Aliyah. We are on the last three words on Samach Tes Amud Beis 69b, all the way at the bottom, and we are still analyzing our Mishnah. We're going to be really focusing on two separate ideas today. One of those ideas is that the Mishnah distinguished between some cases where you're going to be obligated to bring one korban for making mistakes, and one situation where you're going to be obligated to bring many korbanos for mistakes. And the question is, why? Why is it that you bring one for one and many for the other? And that's one thing we're going to be discussing. And then we're going to get into a broader discussion about this. There's something unique about Shabbos. You know, the Torah really says you shouldn't do work on Shabbos. Don't do work on Shabbos. So you would think you would bring one korban for violating Shabbos. But we know, as the Mishnah has been telling us, we've been talking about, is the fact that you bring many korbanos. In certain situations, if I know it's Shabbos and I just don't know about the different malachos, I end up bringing many korbanos over one Shabbos. So imagine a person, just wasn't knowledgeable about Shabbos, and they go through a Shabbos, or this, it's a scary thought, when God willing, Beis Medrash is rebuilt, the amount of korbanos that many of us owe is I don't know. I hope we don't have savings account for our children in college. Carbonos. That would probably be a good idea. I shouldn't be laughing. Okay, I really should. Anyway, so the point is, where does this come from? Normally, if I violate a certain, mitzvah, then I bring one korban. Shabbos is unique in the sense that it says don't do work, and yet I could be obligated up to 39 karbanos for every single Shabbos. Do the math. But the point is, many karbanos, where does that come from? So those are two things we're going to discuss today. Okay, so Hayodea Shu Shabbos. A person knows it's Shabbos. That's the line from the Mishnah. And then a person does many malachos on that Shabbos. You're chayav for every malacha that you did, right? So I know it's Shabbos, but I don't know the concept of borer, and I don't know the concept of cleaning clothing. And, so I'll be chayav for every one of those malachos that I did. I'll be chayav for borer on Shabbos, and I'll be chayav for cleaning on Shabbos, and let's say I also don't know I'm allowed to plant on Shabbos. So that Shabbos, I'll be chayav 3 karbanos for that Shabbos. And then there's an earlier case in that Mishnah which said, I do know the malachos, I do know that those malachos are asur, but I don't know today is Shabbos. How many karbanos am I chayav in that case? Just one. If I don't know it's Shabbos, I'm only chayav 1 karban, even though I did the same malachos, but I just didn't realize it was Shabbos. So ask the Gemara on top of Ayin Amud Aleph, Maishna Reisha, Umaishna Seifa. What's the difference? In both cases, there was a mistake. Why is it in one case I'm chayiv 1 karban, in the other case I'm chayiv a bunch of karbanos? So Amrav Safra, he says like this: Kan miyadiyas Shabbos hu parish, vechan miyadiyas malacha hu parish. So Rav Safra tries to answer like this. We're going to reject this, but he says, in the first case, if I tap the person on the shoulder and say, oh, by the way, today is Shabbos, then the person would stop doing the work, right? In other words, the first case where I'm only going to be chayiv 1 karban, the guy thinks that it's Thursday, and that's why he's planting and he's baking and he's separating and all that stuff. And if I let the person know, hey, today is Shabbos, then he would stop doing the work. Whereas the second case, where I'm going to be chayiv for each one, there the person stops. What would stop the person is not the knowledge of Shabbos, but the knowledge that this action is forbidden, and this action is forbidden, and this action is forbidden. So the point is that in case number one, there is one new knowledge that would cause the person to stop, whereas in the second case, where you're going to bring many karbanos, there's a bunch of new knowledges, there's a bunch of new ideas that make the person stop. And that's why in case number one, I only bring 1 karban, all right? Whereas in case number 2, I can end up bringing many karbanos. Amrle Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman doesn't like this thinking. He says, "Klum parish m'Shabbos el mishum malachos, uklum parish m'malachos el mishum Shabbos." The rationale is not because the fact that I am tapping the person on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, today is Shabbos," or hey, these malachos are forbidden, because really when I tap the person on the shoulder and I let the person know I remind the person, granted I may only have to say, hey, today is Shabbos, but in truth, why does a person stop from doing malachos? Let's say I wake up Shabbos morning and I want to bake myself a cake. Why am I stopping? Why am I not baking the cake? This is not a rhetorical question. I was speaking to Rabbi Soskel who, last night. He told me, who spoke on Shabbos. He said, he knows in their time there's no such thing as a rhetorical question. If you ask anything, then people always respond. So, it's a little early, I know, but what's the deal? Why, if I stop doing malacha on Shabbos, why am I stopping malacha? So if I right,
you're not supposed to do it,
and I know that it's Shabbos. I know both. Meaning, Rav Safra's whole svara, his whole logic is, since I only have to tell the person it's Shabbos, and that's why he's going to stop. That's not true. Granted, I'm saying the word it's Shabbos, but it's not Shabbos in a vacuum. It's the fact that the person now I know it's Shabbos, and I also know it's malachos. Every time I'm remembering not to do something, it's not just malachos are forbidden, it's these actions are prohibited, and today is Shabbos. I'm always reminding myself of those two factors. So granted, in one case, I remind the person one particular thing, but the thing that's causing him to stop from doing the malacha is both the knowledge of Shabbos and the knowledge of the malachos. It's always going to be both. So he says, what's the difference? In both cases, it's the knowledge of both that caused me to stop. So again, going back to the original question, why in one case do I bring one karban? And why in the case when I forget that it's Shabbos, I bring one karban? And in the case where I forget, I know it's Shabbos, but I don't know about the malachos, then I bring many karbanos. So El Amar of Nachman.
So it's like there's two inputs, and in one case you're missing one, and one you're missing the other, but the punishment is different.
Right, and it's the same input in both. Exactly. Emrav Nachman, Karban Nechai Rachman Amai. He says, no. Let's get a little bit, focus on the facts. What is the reason for an obligation for a karban? Ashkaga, for a mistake. In other words, the karban chatas was instituted. God introduced this karban chatas, a beautiful gift, that when a person makes a mistake, you get to bring a karban, and somehow the karban absolves you from that mistake that you made. But the point is, the karban is therefore a mistake. Hasam chadashkaga. In the first case, where the person knows the malachos are forbidden, and I just don't know it's Shabbos, how many mistakes did I make? I made one. There's one lapse of there's one mistake. What's the mistake? I thought today was Thursday, it's Shabbos, right? That's one mistake. Whereas in the case where the person does many malachos on one Shabbos, I know it's Shabbos, but I don't know these things are forbidden, there I made many mistakes. So it's a very straightforward. He says the purpose of the karban is to counter any mistakes, and the point is that in case number one, I know these malachos are forbidden, I just forgot that it's Shabbos, one mistake, therefore one karban. Whereas the second case, where I know it's Shabbos, I just don't know these things are forbidden, or I forgot they're forbidden, there I'm making a bunch of mistakes. Each malacha that I do, that's its own mistake. I don't know this is usher, I don't know that is usher, or I forgot this is usher, I forgot that is usher, and therefore, because there's a bunch of mistakes, I therefore bring a bunch of karbanos corresponding to those different mistakes. Make sense? Okay, fine, and that's the difference between them. Now we get into a longer discussion about where in the Torah do we learn that when it comes to Shabbos, I can end up bringing more than one karban. So far, we've taken that for granted. That if a person, again, just to review the case, it's Shabbos, and a person just doesn't know Hilchos Shabbos, they never learned Hilchos Shabbos, never learned Amud Yomi, and basically they simply don't know what is allowed and what is not allowed on Shabbos. You could end up bringing 10 karbanos for every Shabbos, 15 karbanos, up to 39 karbanos for every Shabbos. Where in the Torah is this indicated? The Torah says, don't do work on Shabbos. Okay, so every lav, typically, the idea would be if there is a prohibition, right? It says, don't eat forbidden fats. So let's say I eat a bunch of forbidden fats over a course of a time, right? Over a course of one forgetting. In other words, I don't know, I forgot that I can't eat these forbidden fats, and I go ahead and I eat them, okay? So I have a long meal, I have a 10-hour meal, whatever it is. How many karbanos do I bring? One karban for that action of eating forbidden fats. When it comes to Shabbos, I can end up bringing many, many different karbanos. Where does that come from? Where does it come from that I have this obligation to bring many different karbanos? That's what the Gemara is going to be dealing with. We're going to go through a bunch of different psukim. So ask the Gemara, first we quote the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Chayav al kal malacha malacha, that if a person knows it's Shabbos and then did many different malachos on Shabbos by mistake, you're chayav a karban for every malacha. Ask the Gemara, Chiluk malachos minalan, where is the source for the separation of malachos into distinct categories of liability? In other words, what's the source to say that I bring a karban for each malacha that I do on Shabbos? Amar Shmuel says, Amar Kra mechalaleha mos yumas. If a person, the pasuk says, if I desecrate Shabbos, the person shall surely be put to death. It should say the person should die, right? It says mechalef, you desecrate Shabbos on purpose. What's the punishment? Death. So the pasuk should say mechaleha yumas. If you desecrate Shabbos, you will die. What's mos yumas? I will die, right? It seems a little extra. So Torah ribsa misos harbe achilul echad. The Torah includes many deaths for one desecration of Shabbos. So you see, mechaleh, one who desecrates, not just you die, but you die and you die and you die. Ask the Gemara, what are you talking about? That pasuk is talking about a person who does malacha on Shabbos deliberately, right? The punishment for violating Shabbos deliberately is death. We're asking the question of karbanos, right? So, how does this connect to karbanos? So, answers the Gemara, how does this connect to a person doing it by mistake? So, answers the Gemara, im eno inyan lemezid. The truth is, this pasuk is not needed for a person who violates Shabbos on purpose. Why? Dichsiv kala osa malacha yumas. We already have a pasuk that says if you do work on Shabbos, you will die. Right? That's the punishment for violating Shabbos on purpose is death. And now you have the second pasuk which says, Mechalel most you must. Another pasuk telling me the punishment is death. I already know that. Why do I need that? So what's the second pasuk for? Teneo inyan l'shogeg. Use the second pasuk to refer to someone who sins on Shabbos, who violates Shabbos by mistake. Umay you must. And what is the word put to death? You must be mammon. You could die monetarily. Yeah, maybe you've been there. Hopefully, we should never be there. But the point is, a person feels like completely strapped of cash. That's also a form of death. Granted, it's not. The commentators point out one of the terms for money is damim. Damim means blood, and damim means money. Right? A person can lose their money, and it's ki'ilu. It's as if they've lost their blood. So the fact that it says you will die, it does not necessarily mean you will die literally, but it could also mean you will die. A person will die through payments, meaning they'll have to pay to buy a carbon. The point is that we learn from this pasuk that like the way he learns the fact that there are different that you bring a number of karbanos for violating Shabbos is from the fact that we already have the pasuk that says you will get killed for violating Shabbos. So now you have a second pasuk, most you must, which says there'll be a couple of deaths, a number of deaths, and we learn from that second pasuk that you could violate Shabbos and end up bringing there'll be many different punishments, i.e. many different karbanos. Yeah? So far so good? Ask the Gemara. We're going to see there's other sources that this can be learned from. Why are you learning it from this pasuk Mechalel Mos Yumas? There's another source. We can learn it from where Rav Nassan learned the fact that there is the term that's being used is separation amalachos. That although there is one pasuk that says you shouldn't work on Shabbos, we still learn that you're going to bring a carbon for every different malacha, every different one of the 39 actions that you do. Each one could generate an obligation for a different carbon. Rav Nassan has a different source. Tanya, we have a brayso. Rav Nassan Omer, Lo sevaru eish b'chol moshvosechem yom haShabbos. Pasuk says you should not kindle a fire in your dwelling place on Shabbos. Matam Lomer, what's the meaning, what's the purpose of this pasuk? Now, we already have a pasuk that says don't do malacha. And included in that pasuk is not to make a fire. Because one of the 39 malachos is not to light a fire. So we already know that. So why does the pasuk go ahead and specify don't light a fire on Shabbos? You with me on the question? In other words, the pasuk says don't do work on Shabbos. Don't do work. Now, what's work? Work is all the 39 malachos. Where did we learn the 39 malachos from? The Mishkan. Whatever was done in the Mishkan, one of the things done in the Mishkan was don't light a fire. So why does the Torah have to go ahead and say, and don't light a fire? It doesn't say don't bake a cake. Why is it specified don't light a fire? So we're going to have a long answer to that question. So it says the Gemara. It says Rav Nassan, Lefishan Emmer, since it says in Parshas Vayakel, Moshe is called Das Ben Yisrael. Moshe gathered the Jewish people. Then it says, Eile hadvarim. These are the things that Hashem commanded them to do. Sheishes yam te'asam malacha. 6 days you should work, and the 7th day you should stop working. Okay, so that's the set of psukim that one of the places where we learned the laws of Shabbos. So now we start to expound on the different words that are used there. It says Eile dvarim. So if it just said dvarim, you would say these are the things. When you say things, what is the minimum amount of things? When I say the word things, I would say 2. 2 is the minimum of, it's plural. Hadvarim, these are the thing. I could have said these are things. When it says these are the things, I now expanded it a little bit more to 3. Then it says Eile hadvarim. These are the things. Eila, the gematria, the numerical value of Eila is 35. Aleph is 36, excuse me. Aleph is 1, Lamed is 30, Hey is 5. So up to 36 plus 3, that's 39. Elu shlosha mentesha malachos shenamru lebamoshe b'Sinai. This is an allusion to the 39 malachos that were taught to Moshe at Har Sinai. Okay, so although there's nowhere in the Torah that says there are 39 malachos, this pasuk he's suggesting is a hint to the fact that there are 39 malachos, the 39 prohibited actions. It says the Gemara further, Yachalasan kulan behelam echad eino chayav ela achas. I would have thought that if I did all of them in one forgetting, in one lack of knowledge, I'd still only be chayav one, which is what we're grappling with, right? In other words, there's still no indication in the Torah that I would bring a carbon for each one. I would have thought I'd bring one carbon for all of them. Tamalomar becharish v'katzer tishbos. It says elsewhere, there's another pasuk that says that a person that you should stop from plowing and reaping. Okay, so now it starts specifying each one. So the fact that it specifies don't plow and don't reap would seem to indicate you bring a special carbon for malachos. It says the Gemara, Vadayin ani omer al charisha v'lakitzira chayiv shtayim. If I plow and reap, maybe I'm going to be chayiv 2 offerings for those malachos. Val kulan ina chayiv achas. But for the 37 remaining malachos, I would still bring only 1 carbon. Tamalomar lo sevaro eish. Now we go back to that original pasuk. That's why it specifically says don't light a fire. So teach me what? So say like this: Havar bechlal haisa kindling, lighting a fire on Shabbos, was part of the general prohibition against performing malacha on Shabbos. V'lama yatzas, why was not lighting a fire singled out? Lahakish elav v'lo melacha, to make a comparison between all the malachos and lighting a fire. Mahav arashi av malacha, just like lighting a fire, which is an av malacha, which is one of the 39 prohibitions. V'chayavin aleh b'fnei atzma, and if you light a fire, you're going to be obligated to bring a carbon for it alone. Af kol shu amalacha chayavin aleh b'fnei atzma, so too any malacha, any one of the 39, if you do it, you're going to be chayav on its own. Okay, so the bottom line is, just to summarize, that Rav Yossi learns that you are going to be obligated to bring a carbon for every malacha from the words lo sevaro eish b'chol moshe v'seichem, the fact that the Torah specifies, again, the short summary is like this. The Torah says don't do malacha on Shabbos, okay? So from there we say don't do malacha, and we know which malacha, the 39 malachos. But then it specifies don't light a fire on Shabbos. Why does it specify that one? To say, just like if you light a fire on Shabbos, now it's its own malacha. So now it's specified on its own. You would bring a carbon for that malacha alone. So too, I can learn to all the other 39. If I just do borer on its own, I also have to bring a carbon. So now we have a source. Rav Nassan has a source to say that you are going to be chayiv to bring a carbon for every individual malacha, and not just one for all the malachos in general. Okay?
Why would they single out the
fire
then as opposed to any other?
Good question. We're going to hold off on that question. It's a good question. Sure, a lot of discussion about that. Shmuel Sever. So the Gemara answers why. Again, the Gemara was asking why doesn't Shmuel learn like Rav Yossi? So Shmuel Sever like Rav Yossi. Why doesn't Shmuel hold like Rav Nassan, who just said we learn it from lo sevaru eish, from not lighting a fire? Shmuel Sever like Rav Yossi. He learns like Rav Yossi, who holds that the malacha of lighting a fire was singled out not to teach about the others, but rather to be exceptional, to say that it's just a prohibition and not a capital crime. The time we have a brayz that says, Havara lav yatzas, Divrei Rav Yossi. Rav Yossi says that the reason lo sevaru eish was singled out was to make it less than the other malachos. Rav Nassan Omer, lechalek yatzas, the reason it was singled out is to separate it, to make it, to teach us about all the other 39 malachos. In other words, like this, again, it says don't do work on Shabbos. Now we know from Halach L'Moshe Misinai, we have a Masorah that don't do work is including all the 39 malachos. Okay? Yeah? Everyone with me, right? So basically, don't work means all the 39 malachos, okay? But then it singles out, don't light a fire. Why did it single out not to light a fire? One opinion is, Rav Nassan's opinion is, the reason it was singled out is not because lighting a fire is special. Answer Max's question. We're not going to answer Max's question. We don't know why it was singled out. I mean, why that one specifically? We don't know. But it was singled out, and once it's singled out, we ask, wait, why do you have to single one out? You already know all the malachos are forbidden. The fact that it singles one out is telling me that each and every one of them, if I were just to do that malacha, I would bring a carbon for each and every one. So that's the source for saying I bring a carbon for each and every one. However, the reason Shmuel did not learn that is because Shmuel holds the reason it was singled out was not because it should teach me about the other ones, but rather because there's something special about lighting a fire. And that is, not so well known, that lighting a fire actually out of all the 30 malachos is the least of the most stringent. In other words, there is this opinion, the opinion of Rav Yossi, who holds that the reason lighting a fire is singled out is because if I light a fire, whereas if I do borer on Shabbos, if someone warns me before I do borer, someone comes over and says, hey, by the way, separating things on Shabbos is a capital crime. And I laugh at the guy. I said, what's the big deal? I'm just separating my cards in my Monopoly game into different things. I'm cleaning up. I want to clean up. That's not a big deal. And the guy will come to court the next day and be like, 2 witnesses, we warn the guy, and capital crime. Person will die. Okay? A little scary. Okay? Don't clean up your Monopoly games into separate categories. Okay? On Shabbos. Okay, fine. So that's true by borer. But if a person lights a fire on Shabbos, according to Rav Yossi, you would get lashes and not get killed. That's why it's separated out. That's why it's distinct and not like the other ones. Fascinating? I think it's fast. Okay, fine. Bottom line is that's why he doesn't learn from there. Ask the Gemara further. Fine. Granted, he can't learn from Lo Sevaru Eish, but why doesn't he learn like where Rav Yossi learns his source for Chilik Malachos? Tanya. We have another source for separating the Malachos into that you get a carbon chatos for each Malacha. Tanya. We learned in the Brayz of Yossi Omer. Va'asa me'achas mehena. The pasuk says if you do from one of them. If you va'asan, you do me'achas from one, mehena from them. Okay, so the words are a little bit awkward. It should say if you do malacha, but it says va'asa me'achas mehena. Pa'amim shechayaven achas al kulan. So you learn from this pasuk. Sometimes you're going to do many malachos, only chayav one. Upa'amim shechayaven al kol achas v'achas. Sometimes you're going to be chayav for each one. Okay, and the Gemara is now going to explain the rationale behind this, explain what this means. Rav Yossi, Rav Chanina, my time to Rav Yossi. What's the reason for Rav Yossi? Achas me achas. The pasuk should have just said one. Why does it say me achas, from one? Hein, heina, mehena. And it could have just said of them. Why does it say mehena, of them? Okay, so now we're going to expound on each extra word. Achashi ena. Sometimes there is one thing which is of them. Okay, heina shi achas. And sometimes there is them. There are many things which is equivalent to one. Okay, so what does this mean? Achas Shimon. Let's say a person's writing on Shabbos. Writing on Shabbos is one of the 39 malachos. If I write on Shabbos, I'm going to be chayav. Let's say I do it by mistake, I'm going to be chayav achatas. If I do it on purpose, I'm going to be chayav death. Okay, Achas Shimon. If we would just say the words achas, let's say I wanted to write the word Shimon. Okay, so I've started writing Shimon, right? And that's my intention. So it's one action. Me achas, the fact that it says from one, teaches me that shame mi Shimon. If I stop in the middle and I just wrote shame, I didn't finish what I wanted to do. But I did want to write Shimon, but I ended up writing shame. I'm actually still going to be chayav, right? Because shame is also a word, right? Even though I didn't write what I wanted to write, but since I did also want to write shame, I'm going to be liable. And we learned that from achas, me achas. It could have said achas, and why did it say from one? Teaching me that there's one malacha that even if I didn't finish the malacha, I'm still going to be chayav, okay? Heina avos, the fact that it says of one of them, it says them, that teaches me that I'm chayav for doing the avos malachos, 39 malachos. Meheina toldos, the fact that it says from them or of them, teaches me that not only my chayav for avos, but there are also things which are learned from the avos, i.e. toldos. We haven't really gotten into avos and toldos yet, but the point is that there are things called toldos, and I'm going to be chayav for toldos as well. Okay, fine. Further, achashihena, there is a transgression of one commandment that is equivalent to them. What does that mean? Is don Shabbos v'shigas malachos. It's an area where I know it's Shabbos, but I don't know the malachos. There, I'm going to be chayav for many karbanos. Heina shi achas, and there's a case of them, meaning I do many malachos, and still only chayav one. What's that? Shigas Shabbos is don malachos. That's a case where I don't remember Shabbos, but I do know about the malachos. There, I'm only going to be chayav one. The point is that the above achashi heina, one thing that is them, right? Achashiena, what do we say over there? We said that a person knows it's Shabbos and doesn't know about the malachos, I'm chayav for each and every one, right? So you see from there that a person is going to be chayav for many karbanos for violating Shabbos. So why doesn't Shmuel learn it from the same source? And so the Gemara, Shmuel achashihena v'hena shi achas lo mashmalei. This whole limud is a little bit much for him. He doesn't learn this idea of one which is many, many which is one. There's no implication that something is extra over here, and therefore that's not his source, and therefore he learns it from a different place. So bottom line is, to summarize the entire Gemara, there are three different sources. The bottom line is that when Shabbos is unique, whereas opposed to if I eat many, many different forbidden fats in one sitting, in one meal, I have a whole meal of forbidden fats, I go to the forbidden fat restaurants, I eat like this forbidden fat, that forbidden fat, that forbidden fat, I'm only going to bring one korban chatas, okay? When it comes to Shabbos, we do borer, if I separate on Shabbos, then I plant on Shabbos, then I bake on Shabbos, I'm going to bring a bunch of them, and there are three different sources for where that can be learned. Bottom line is, everyone agrees that this is the halacha. The halacha is if you do a bunch of different forbidden malachos on Shabbos, I bring a korban for each one. The only question is what the source is, and that is the debate, and I don't think I have time for Rav Dessler. So, have a great day, and we'll pick up tomorrow. All the best.